Hello and welcome to Broadcast Focus. My name is Russell Trafford-Jones and thanks for joining me on Broadcast Focus. We talk to the people behind the media and entertainment industry. Now, ahead of Radio TechCon taking place in November, we're taking a look at a number of radio topics, which is why I'm delighted to be joined by Valentijn Siebrands, who not only is Solutions Manager for Unified Streaming, but in his spare time is the Technical Coordinator for RTV Connect, a community radio in Arnhem, Netherlands. Welcome, Valentijn.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, this is cool to do. Yeah.
Well, you know, I think it's not a surprise that people in the media industry have media-related hobbies, and it's also nice to talk about your hobbies occasionally.
Yeah, it is.
So, you know, we've spent some time at events talking about what you get up to, and I thought it would be really good to share that, and not only because it's kind of fun, but also I think a lot of people have got in TV, shall we say, have got a radio backstory.
Yeah,
and it's actually quite nice and unifying to share those stories. I only started broadcast, I think, as something that I did and really understood that I could do anything about it through radio, which is weird and ironic, I guess, because I'd seen lots of OBs. I'd been into the gallery, you know, the scanners. I'd been part of TV programs, but I never thought that I could work on them, even though I was extraordinarily interested when they were around. And then I started listening to the student radio at the local university, which is where I went to. But even while I was listening to that, I didn't think, oh, well, they probably need somebody cleaning the faders. And so it was only when I finally got to the Society's Fair in the first week or two of university, they just had this scrappily written A4 piece of paper at the back saying engineers wanted. I thought, oh, that sounds like it could be.
Maybe that's something. Maybe, yeah.
So I started there, and it was a lot of fun. And you know, I think there's whether it's community radio, student radio, hospital radio, that has a great community behind it. But that spills out very notably, I think, certainly in the UK, into the radio industry and the professional capacity as well. There's a very strong ethos in radio about connecting people, and there's some elements of radio lend themselves much better to creative storytelling, but also you know, conversations. So I think it's important, and we also need to remember people talking in television about, you know, where's 4K and why aren't we doing 3D and VR and things like that. It's important to remember that even if we start doing those things, they're not going to get rid of video like, you know, we're producing now, just in the same way as video hasn't got rid of radio or audio. Right? They're all different and important things in various different ways, and so there's a lot of goodwill behind radio. So how did you get involved in community radio?
Community radio was something like, I was about 6, 7, 8. Started listening to the radio. I discovered it. You know, you turn the dial. Oh wow! You know, this is the east of the Netherlands, so you can hear Dutch radio, but also German radio. So that's funny. You turn the dial and you hear a language you don't understand, and that morphed into, I want to be a radio presenter. But in order to be a radio presenter, you needed, of course, a microphone, but most of all, a transmitter.
Yes.
So I started to learn myself electronics, and of course the target, an FM transmitter, because then so I built a lot of transmitters, you know, even later very advanced with crystals and time base and PLLs, and to keep them on the frequency, because otherwise they would drift because of the temperature. But anyway, ended up doing, let's say, pirate radio stuff, because there was no solution for, let's say, local stations, legal solutions. Long story short, pirate radio, but then the government changed its mind. Let's do a licensing scheme for, you know, local radio in every community, so that we can get rid of this piracy. That change sort of overnight happened, which is really funny. This happened somewhere between 88 and 89. And suddenly, of course, pirate stations turned into local stations. And they even received money, something like €1, today euros, per household in the community. So with a very, very tiny budget, for my community, back in the day, it was €28,000. For a city like Arnhem, €100,000. It's something like, this is barely enough to run an organization and a radio station and pay the rights, the coffee, the rent, transmission sites. It adds up. Let's put it that way. But that is how I got into radio, from piracy to local stations, having no budget at all, but still trying to do it simply because it's cool. And then over time, of course, I wanted to be the presenter, but over time I discovered, also because I went to university, like IT, broadcast, technical things, that is my domain. I shouldn't be a presenter or whatever. I know how it works and the mic is nice, but no, I would rather do streaming, TCP/IP networks. But I still, the other important bit that is still there in terms of listening, I love playing with Optimods and sound processors. That's always cool. I got a new one in about 4 weeks ago, and it's always cool to test new things with sound processing. It's my hobby.
I know the feeling of, I used to, basically, when I was doing a show on student radio, I'd be fixing the mics or the faders or both during the tracks, and then watching the clock and making sure I was okay, I better put the soldering iron down. And then when that becomes a faff and the links are more arduous than the rest of the time, then I figured probably shouldn't be in front of the mic. So I think it's interesting. The first thing to mention, so we used to, at student radio, used to do a 1 month RSL, restricted services license, and we also used to do low power AM and all year round. But on the FM at the time, there wasn't anything longer really for FM for community, although that has changed since. And what I'm not aware of, and I may be wrong here, but I'm not aware of any grant of money that comes to you, however small it is, whether it's a euro or otherwise. So it's one of those things. You got to be careful how much you play the violin when you're saying, well, we're only being given money by the government. But I think it's a very healthy attitude from the government, and we can dig a bit further into that. But you've got to get funding from somewhere. And
you need funding, but it also means that it creates, and this is for many people, their biggest thing, their hobby. It's what they love. So in essence, it's one community, one license. So it also creates friction / competition between hobbyists, because they want to score the license and get some funding to really do your hobby for real. Which is, there are situations in the media in the Netherlands overall, I've worked all over the place, where we always refer to, this really sounds like a local radio station situation because something messes up. But I think it's really good that the government in the Netherlands sort of allows this. There are, of course, conditions to make this possible. And it started really small, but I think although the processes for law are slow, when this started, let's say end of the 80s, early 90s, it was mono only, maximum 50 watts of transmission power, no RDS, nothing, bare minimum mono audio. But over the years, it increased to, on a technical level, oh, wow, RDS, stereo, oh, wow. Transmitters up to 2 kilowatts. Oh, wow.
That's pretty good.
But that is, let's say, changes that the government allowed to happen in order to grow the model. And today that is going to change into something which is way more professional, because after 50 years, this whole system of local stations started very primitive. and it was first non-radio spectrum at all, hospitals, that sort of stuff. But this system exists 50 years in the Netherlands, and now they are slowly rolling this into what they call the journalistic house. This is a Dutch term, maybe. But what they want is from, let's say, like in the UK, from a BBC national perspective, have a media organization, news organization that is able to reach up until the street. You can really go down to a village, a street, and that is the same organization. And most of all, they share the same system so that you are aware of what's happening in this village, because this village is nothing. But there might be something which is worth looking at on a national level. So finally, after all these years, there are now plans to make local community stations, which are purely hobbyist and voluntary things with a bit of money, into something which is really professional.
So let's pick up on that point before we look too closely at at the specifics of the regions and the way things are laid out. I was just looking through some responses to Ofcom on the consultation for small-scale DAB in the UK, and we'll talk about DAB later. But one of the comments was, I think that the multiplex should be filled by professional organisations rather than community ones, and they made it sound like they'd listened to the trial. And it didn't necessarily sound amazing. Now I'm imagining that there's a fair number of kind of highly professional operating, albeit effectively staffed by volunteers, stations, but I don't know that's true. I wondered how you felt.
Okay. Yeah, I see. Yeah. So in the Netherlands, local stations are public broadcasters, with of course public funding, like we just discussed. One license per community. That is sort of a fairly simple model. Late 90s, so 1996-ish, commercial national radio stations, which were only able to broadcast on cable via what they call U-turn constructions. So one of the stations, I have to explain this because in the end you can understand what this horrible system looks like today. So late 80s, early 90s, commercial radio started in the Netherlands only broadcasting on cable, but it wasn't allowed under Dutch law. But because of the EU, cable companies had to distribute foreign radio channels.
Okay.
So Radio 10 in the Netherlands, which still exists, started as a commercial radio station, watch this, in Dutch, broadcasting from Milan in Italy.
Okay.
And really, 1 watt on FM in Italy, therefore a foreign broadcaster with a Dutch program. And Radio 10 started broadcasting on national cable. So the Netherlands is every household has cable in this country.
Okay.
It's only the urban areas where it doesn't add up, let's say. So that is the start of commercial radio. Of course, they wanted to broadcast on FM, and mid-90s, they won a couple of court cases, and that was the start for commercial radio on FM. Blah, 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 blah. Then they started, of course, they wanted more channels, the commercial guys. So there was a whole discussion, took about a decade to, take the whole FM spectrum, reassign, shuffle, blah, 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 public, commercial. And now we have, 15 commercial national stations. For local stations, of course, there's always been public, but there is also commercial local stations. And now I'm getting back to your point. These guys barely have money, love their hobby, but they have to be commercial, either because they lost out on the public one for the local thing, or they wanted to be bigger, but not national, because the big money national guys already did something. So there are local commercial radio stations, but it's not big business, let's say. But of course, in metropolitan areas like Amsterdam and Rotterdam, there are stations that really, money-wise work. And I think when you look at DAB, what the government is doing is that there is a sunrise period where they say this is going to be a multiplex. Public broadcasters go first. If you apply for a license for DAB, you will get it. And, the capacity that's left will be auctioned off for, if there is enough demand, of course, will be auctioned off or, will be available for local stations, commercial stations. These commercial stations are small, most of all voluntary, or, it's not huge revenues they make, except maybe in Amsterdam or the big cities. But that's about it. The national stations are by law now becomes this sort of spaghetti again. The national stations, it's funny enough, do not have national coverage. There are always areas where they cannot be received because the government strictly didn't want that to happen. Okay. And in those areas, there is a national station which is called Q Music, which is roughly the whole of the Netherlands, but there are areas where it isn't the case. And then there is Q Music, let's say South, or Q Music North, or, just to cover that one edge, right, as a local, between quotes, local commercial station. And it carries sort of the same program.
What's the motivation for having a national broadcaster that can't be received throughout the whole nation?
I don't know. It's the government trying to limit the power of commercial radio or TV. Yeah. I think that is what it is. But it is the case. This is how it works in the Netherlands. There are, let's say, gaps in the national coverage, and big money tries to use local commercial stations to fill the gap. Because the name and, of course, national coverage, every percentage point for reach helps in terms of revenue and money. Yeah. And I think in the end that's about it, because the margins, when you look at the figures in the Netherlands, are very low. The biggest station might be, I don't know, 11.5%, but the second best is, I don't know, 11.3. Effectively, right. That means that community extra, and then I'm the biggest, and then I have the most money. It's commercial. That is how it works. Yeah.
So should we have a quick look at see how it's all split up?
Yeah.
We've got a map here of the Netherlands.
Yeah.
So you're based over here, is that right?
Yeah, Arnhem. Yeah. So that is the yellow, the blue, and the green.
And so each of these areas is its own local station.
Yeah. Some stations have 2 frequencies. Most of them only have 1.
Is that just for coverage reasons?
Just for coverage reasons. And this area in the Netherlands, the area of Arnhem, is special because north of us is the national park, which makes it impossible to do anything with transmitters. That is what you also can see. In the middle of this picture, there is no frequency because there's no one there, basically.
Okay.
So Arnhem is 105.9. Then we have other villages like Rheden and Roosendaal, 107.2. And because of the national park, they needed another transmitter in the north, which is 106.9. And then to the east, you have 94.0. And then you have Lingewaard and all the others. Yeah.
And you're responsible as a station for putting transmitters wherever you need them to get the coverage.
Yeah. I'm allowed to, let's say, by law. But long story short, this is how the map looks like today. All local stations, all local community money providing funding for local news, between quotes. But it's not professional organizations. It's not part of the National Public Broadcaster News Organization, NOS or NPO in the Netherlands. So about 2015, 16, the decision was taken by national government to change the landscape, for real, if you look at the map, by saying something along the lines of, on the 1st of January 2027, local stations shall have merged with their neighbors. And of course, it's not a national network anymore, but where it makes sense. Some communities really depend on each other. Therefore, it makes sense to also merge them from a local radio perspective. And that is what we are now in the middle of that process. So if you look at this map, you have yellow and green, 105.9 and 94.0. That today is one single media organization called RTV Connect, which is the one that I'm, between quotes, doing my hobby. Over time, the one to the south in gray will join, and the ones to the north, blue, also have to join at some point, because simply, this is how it works in the Netherlands. The king on the 1st of January will just say, your license is no more. And that's it. So you better merge, because otherwise the big ones will take over. So if you take the next, I shared you the other map, which is this one. So you saw the many colors and different frequencies and blah, blah, blah on the previous map, but this is the landscape according to the plans on the 1st of January 27. Stations have merged. A lot fewer, but also the funding has changed. So today, €1 per household, good luck. But now it will be something like you apply for the license for one region, and in this case, we will be region 39. You prove that you actually have journalists working for you. And of course, there are, regulations about news gathering, and, tons of things you have to answer for. And in essence, there will be a committee that says, yes, this organization can be called regional or sub-regional broadcaster, therefore are entitled to more funding or serious funding. So over time, from a local station like Arnhem that is started with something like €100,000, it is now going, or this year it's something like €600,000 or €700,000, because we are now from hobbyists moving or morphing into a professional organization. So we have a couple of people on our payroll now, but I'm still a volunteer, because this also creates very, very awkward situations. I'm a volunteer. I'm the technical guy, not the only one. There are 3 of us. But, long story short, we are all 3 volunteers. But we have to support a professional organization, which is awkward, because it cannot be that way. But that is how it is today. We accept this because this is temporary. Over time, the funding model will be so good, between quotes, that there should be or is enough money for a professional organization to sustain itself, also on a technical level. And I think we will reach that point by the end of 25 next year, because of 2 reasons. Of course, more money, which helps to hire people, but also on the 1st of September 25, all of these colors on the map will also be their own, DAB multiplex. And in order to roll out DAB, you have to be serious. This is no longer a piece of cake, just an FM transmitter, good luck with it, because with DAB, we can talk about it later, but we need much more than just a single location. And it's much more in terms of money. So that is why this getting professional is a serious journey. It's also interesting to look at how things develop, especially from an IT broadcast perspective, because, hobbyists like to tinker with things, but it doesn't mean it's professional. And that delivers very interesting discussions. But anyway, this is the journey that local stations are on. They are going to be, let's say, larger in terms of coverage, larger in terms of money, and they become part of the national broadcast news desk, if you can call it like that.
Right. And when you say part of the news desk, do you mean that there is a link with other organizations, or no one says there will be official?
There will be official. So
NOS or?
Yeah, with NOS. So the model they envision, so I'm talking about 27 now, is national, is NOS, goes to regional, which is in this case Omroep Gelderland, which is the regional broadcaster. And the regional broadcaster has connections with the local larger stations, the sub-regional ones. Streekomroepen, they're called in the Netherlands. But anyway, the chief editor at RTV Connect, moved to the regional broadcaster about a month ago. Literally, he has a new job. He said goodbye. I'm going to the regional, because he will be the coordinator to connect the regional broadcasters to all the sub-regional broadcasters. He will be, let's say, the central post where everybody can. He will read all news and say this can be worth to pass up, give it to the regional or the national guys.
Yeah.
Not only from a content perspective, but also from a technical perspective. In the end, the dots will be connected. There will be a single content management system, or that is of course the ideal end situation. But of course, there are hobbyists and other whatever. But this is the final picture. It's getting real, and the news desk is then this, let's say, tower where they are all paid by the public broadcaster money. Let's say the money that is available for public broadcasting in the Netherlands is divided between these three levels, and they hire people, of course, and build organizations to sustain and support that over time. And that is interesting to witness, because you can immediately see that the NOS, which is the national one, sometimes really reaches out to the lowest level in Arnhem and say, can you make a video about this, because this is interesting? Or you made a news item yesterday about this one, but we would like to use it, or can you go again, because we want you to zoom in on this. So it becomes part of the same production arm, let's say.
It's interesting, because it's overall it sounds like a good idea, and the aim of certainly having that kind of integrated vertical ability to target local news as well as national, it does make sense in order to make sure that as a populace you have access to the most relevant and useful news. It also makes sense to at the same time to bolster the funding, and that with that kind of comes that necessary. It feels like it's probably necessary to make it sub-regional at that point. So all of those kind of make sense, but on the other hand, it also feels like it's taking away from some of the previous aspects.
The charm of local hobbies.
I mean, I assume this doesn't. Well, yeah. I mean, when I was at university, we had a couple of. I did a few summers over in America, just working there in a theme park, as you do. But then I emailed through to two organizations while I was there to say, can I help you out? I do radio, and one of them was a local commercial station who I can't remember I think they got back to me, but it was a no, but I knew it would be a no anyway. And the other one was NPR, and I emailed them and they said, yeah, sure, come along and help out.
Yeah.
And so, I think that shows what the it shows what the culture affects, because obviously NPR, they're not a volunteer organization, and it was probably after about the fourth weekend of me going down there, and they said, we probably should start paying you at some point. And I said, well, if you really want to, I'm a student, I'll take money. But they were willing to have someone along and to help out, even though technically it's not really. I think technically in the insurance they probably shouldn't have. But anyway, I guess I bring this up not to say that this is destroying that atmosphere. I don't think it does.
No, it doesn't.
Always welcoming when you've got that attitude, and it's that kind of public radio for the public good.
It's for the public good, but also most news organizations are still able to formulate their own vision on things.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we will be news, and we take the money, happy days, and that's it. But most of them are actually saying, no, we need to educate people. We need to hunt for talent. We need to cooperate with other universities and schools in the neighborhood in order to, not only, do a public, function, because we educate people and we try to, win people over for media and educate them, but it's also because it makes it possible to connect to your local community. To the south here, there is the other sub-regional one, RN7, which is the city of Nijmegen. which is a huge university and university hospital city. Of course, they have to connect to student life. Of course, they have to connect to, let's say, medical things because of the hospital. So what you see there is that because of the city, the local broadcaster there really has programs for students made by students. And what you see there is that, on average, between quotes, they deliver more people to the national broadcaster than we do, simply because they have more connections with students, because this is a student city. Arnhem is not a student city. It's just a provincial capital, but no, educationally speaking, it's not so big. So the focus in Arnhem is much more on telling the stories and storytelling. So we have a couple of students that are trying to learn how you tell stories in different aspects of storytelling. Of course, focusing on video today, but they try to do audio as well. But it is part of the culture, it is part of the community, and it depends on where you are as a local station, what you can tap on. In Nijmegen it's universities. Over here it's more stories and history, because Arnhem has a rich history, Second World War and things that happened before. Therefore, it's very interesting to make stories about history. But it's always, at least from RTV Connect perspective, really tried to connect with younger people, not only because it's interesting, but also trying to help them to help them educate themselves, but also media is maybe something you should do. We've had some talent at RTV Connect that came in about 2 years ago, and they are now on national TV, because sometimes someone walks in, fully natural, and like, oh yeah, it's good. Call this guy, or this department, because this is really something. Sometimes that happens, but it is that connection with, let's say, the educational departments in your neighborhood that shall be maintained also going forward, because it shall be, or is, a condition to get the subsidies from the national government. They really try to, I don't know, make that a thing, a requirement to make that possible.
Do you think that going sub-regional, though, makes it harder to focus in on the kind of those local aspects?
It shouldn't be the case, but I guess it will happen. I think in the end, you have to feel, if you do local news on the radio, there is a limit on the amount of content that you can produce. There is a limit on the amount of things that you can sort of manage and broadcast, between quotes. And that also means that maybe, let's say, smaller news stories or less interesting news stories will be maybe only published online as, a small column and a picture. That's it. What we call the 112 news over here, which is like ambulances and police stuff. It's usually not that interesting, but noteworthy, right?
Sure.
But the bigger stories will definitely be there, but the smaller ones will probably suffer over time, because you have to make choices, and the budget is never enough to do everything.
Sure.
Yeah.
You mentioned DAB earlier, and I think that's intriguing, because DAB, as I said, we're experimenting with that, and I'm not really up to date, so I'm not going to try and represent what we're doing. But we are looking at small scale DAB multiplexes. But the aim would be, my understanding is that if I am a radio organization, then I would apply and try and be on one. But you're suggesting that you're kind of getting one by default, and you're expected to use it.
No, you don't get it. You still have to apply for it.
All right.
But how difficult is it to fill in a form and say, I want this? And of course, 6 weeks later, you get a piece of paper, hereby granted, blah. So what we are trying to do in the Netherlands, or tried to do, is, first of all, let's say, they had to negotiate with Germany and the UK and Belgium spectrum. Then they had to decide how to make it possible for local stations to function in this spectrum. So they figured the Netherlands can be divided I'm going to say insane numbers. So the Netherlands is not a big country, but there shall be 57 DAB multiplex allotments for the country, each containing 18 channels. A single multiplex will be 18 channels.
Is this DAB plus or DAB?
It's DAB plus. Yeah, DAB
Okay.
plus. So long story short, if you look at between my region, I'm responsible for region number 40, which is blue in the, that is the region. I'm not responsible. I'm participating in the multiplex because now, again, a typical Dutch twist. Your license is only valid if you create, let's say, a foundation or some sort of corporation on a legal level where the other participants in the same multiplex, in this case number 40, agree to cooperate to fill the multiplex. So that is, a new thing that you have to create between quotes with your colleagues, between quotes.
So you're obliged to find 18 channels worth of content?
No.
Okay.
This is the complicated thing. So an allotment 40 is open for, you can apply for a license. And then the government says allotment 40 is 18 channels. Public radio goes first. Blah, 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 blah. In the end, 6 stations ask for a place in the multiplex in region or in allotment 40. And of course, there are a number of slots open. And then the government says, oh, is there any commercial interest? No, the demand was low, so there is no auction, and there are just 2 other commercial stations participating in our allotment.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have to create this cooperation agreement, and on paper it should exist by the end of November this year. And now the twist in the story. This is then a cooperation between public radio and commercial radio. But it doesn't mean you can start transmitting, because the next step makes it awkward. This is National Public Radio Organization for local stations will be the operator for DAB plus for the local stations in the whole of the Netherlands. So they will effectively run 57 allotments. And they wrote out or started doing a tender about, half a year ago, where companies like Broadcast Partners, Cellnex could, let's say, respond to the RFP. And it's now in the final stages of that the NLPO for the local stations can start giving the multiplex corporations an indication of costs to start broadcasting in your allotment. That also means that the public broadcaster is actually facilitating commercial broadcasters to participate in the multiplex, which is, let's say, I would say typical Dutch sauce, because it's funny.
Is that just an interesting irony, or is that a contentious issue?
I think it's an irony, but it's caused by the fact that, of course, DAB for public radio will be subsidized. There will be money for them, or for us.
Mm-hmm.
But the money, of course, should not go to the commercial broadcasters. But this is getting insane, because you will place in our region, if you take the map from Arnhem, the one with the blue line, it's really funny if you talk about this.
Pop that in.
Yeah. So yeah, that one. So yeah, if you zoom out, this is Arnhem, and everything, the blue thing is our region. When it comes to allotment 40, we have to do DAB in here. Fine. Regardless if it's public or commercial, in actually doing this, you need about 4 to 6 transmitters, somewhere on the map in order to make DAB possible. From a commercial perspective, that means you have to invest in, sites to put them, commercially speaking. Mm-hmm. You have to rent a site, you have to buy equipment, you have to do all the lines and the timing and blah, 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 encoders, blah, 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 and then you're transmitting. But what happens now is that the public broadcaster or the public money that is available to do DAB for local stations is also going to be used or consumed by commercial stations, because you cannot separate this anymore.
Yep.
So effectively speaking, it is the public broadcaster or the local stations or the sub-regional stations that are going to do DAB. And by doing so, given the volume of stations, because it's 210 of them today, that means that the public broadcaster basically dictates how we're going to do this. You don't have many things you can, there's not that many options you can do, you can pick from. Then in 27, the 210 local stations will merge or shall have merged into the sub-regional ones. So you go down from 210 organizations to something like 80. And then with the commercial station, these two, organizational types, if you will, the public and the commercial ones, will jointly run the multiplex for a given allotment. Where for commercial stations can only broadcast with a maximum of 3 DAB allotments. So only neighboring allotments can be combined for commercial stations.
Okay.
Only 3 of them.
Again, to stop them getting too big.
Yeah, and again, to stop them to become national broadcasters. The problem that we have right now is that this is public information. The NLPO did ask, the government did say, who wants to have a license, blah, blah, blah. In the end, including commercial ones, there's 50% available still. There is no one who wants to have the other 50% of the available capacity. That probably means in our multiplex for our allotment, of course, we need to do the corporation and the paperwork first and blah, blah, blah. But in the end, we can probably increase the bit rate for the audio channels that we're going to do, because, 48, 64 could be 128, which is, ideal from an audio perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what it's going to be. This is, by law, we have a license. RTV Connect has a license. Actually, we have 2 licenses, but that is another story. By the 1st of September 25, this map will be DAB for this region.
So that reminds me of so when I was at Student Radio, that was actually during the birth of DAB in the UK, and I guess it's almost the inverse had happened, because we had the national we had obviously there's national multiplexes and there were some regional multiplexes, and they were run by they may still be run by them, but they're run by a central organization which was also part of or affiliated with GWR, now Global. And they actually reached out to us as a Student Radio and said, oh, well, would you like to come on? And so we got our encoder. We just got an encoder, computer encoding it, sent it down the over the internet at 64 kilobits. They received it on Winamp and put it onto the multiplex.
Yeah, why not?
for quite a while, actually. And that was one of my fears when that all started, that it would make it harder for community radio to get on, because there was no, and it's only recent, the same as with the Netherlands, that we're really talking about small DAB multiplexes. So you talked about a company that's going to run the multiplexes. Are they going to handle the intricacies of the timing and the connectivity and the siting? Or
I think this is not finalized, but it's something like the NLPO, which is the local branch organization for local stations. They will appoint 1 or 2 national operators for the DAB multiplexes for the 57 allotments. And of course, these companies, broadcast partners being an example, will run the networks as they do, because they also operate the national ones. But the interesting piece will be, because you can also look at this from, let's say, how do you call this? Running a property business. So I have to explain this. If you are broadcast partners, which is Cellnex, who owns transmission sites for mobile and broadcasting in the Netherlands, probably just like in the UK. Cellnex, I don't know. They have a market share. I really don't know, but let's say 50%. And now they want to do, or they have to do, or they apply for doing DAB for the local stations. But the government says there is a maximum power, therefore you need more transmission sites. It's going to be an interesting topic to see how the NLPO, which is a public body, is going to negotiate with the commercial party, not only the transmission itself, but also getting hold of the transmission sites. Because most public stations have transmission sites for free. You know, in the old days, you're not going to do it. Hey, this is your building. Oh, can we do? Yeah, that's fine. The local station, you're helping, supporting, blah, blah, blah. But now it's changing into something which is way more commercial. So, you know, there is a potential where, how do you say, a DAB operator can actually do a land grab from the free transmission sites from the local stations into something which is like running a property business. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. Because one thing for sure, one thing is really, really sure, there are not enough transmission sites owned by the companies that run networks today to cover what they need to cover with the 57 allotments. So there shall be a moment where someone says, hey, transmission site, oh, this one is the local stations. Can we hire this from you? But there was no money involved. It was just voluntary, you know, doing a good service for the community. That might actually break things going forward, but let's see how this goes, because this is the interesting bit on how things work.
Yeah,
I think.
See, so I mean, but the good side of that is that you, unlike with the FM transmitters, you as a radio station aren't tasked with
for
going
DAB,
around.
it's going to be outsourced. For FM, it's us. It's FM is ourselves. That's us. Yeah. You know, building 40, you know, 14 store. Oh, antenna, blah, blah. It's really interesting, but that's also cool. But that shall be no more, because in the end, you know, FM is going to be switched off at some point. I don't know when, but you know, in 32 maybe. Like in Norway, they did it in 2017 already. At some point, DAB shall be the only radio spectrum-based medium for broadcasting. Therefore, outsourcing this makes sense, because, you know, I don't want to run six transmission sites for the DAB. I have my hands full with the 4 that I have for FM. Yeah.
Quite right. So I'll just pop this on screen. This is a snapshot of your website, RTV Connect.
Yeah.
rtvconnect.nl.
Yeah, .nl, yes. And this is the local news from Arnhem. You can see Vitesse, which in the old days had something to do with the UK and Chelsea and blah, blah, blah. Okay. But it was all dirty money and Russians and blah, blah, blah. But, you know, it still exists. It's still alive. And, of course, huge fan base. Therefore, we cover it.
That's great. Really appreciated hearing you know, how this is all playing out over in the Netherlands. It's really interesting, and I hope everybody else enjoyed it and followed along. If you liked it, please make sure you're subscribed and pop a like on the video. I'd like to say thank you to Fiona and Becky from Page Media, without whom this wouldn't be possible. And Valentijn, very much appreciate you coming on and chatting, and hopefully we can do it again in the future.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
It was nice to